You've heard AM, you've heard FM. Now, tune into DM Radio, the world's longest running show about data. Each week, host Eric Kavanaugh interviews the brightest minds in the world of information management. Want to be on a show? Send an email to info@dmradio.biz. Now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh here. We turned 15 in a couple of weeks. We launched DM Radio in 2008. So now it's, of course, 2023. Time flies and you're having fun. And we talked about artificial intelligence back in 2008. AI has been around for 40, 50 years or so. In fact, it went through a whole winter. There's an AI winter. If you don't believe me, Google it or go into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT about the AI winter. I'm sure it'll give you an honest answer. I threw ChatGPT into the abstract today because it is such a prominent technology. I mean, it's really very, very disruptive and very, very interesting. It's good at writing poems, by the way. It's good at writing advertisements. It's good at copywriting that is creative and interesting and dynamic. So for those use cases, it's fantastic. You can also have it write a story for you, an article. There are lots of conversations going on right now about students using ChatGPT to write papers for school, which of course we don't want. And that means teachers are going to have to make you write in class and just crank it out in front of everybody else to prove that you can write. So I would say to all the students listening out there, don't use ChatGPT to write your articles or write your news stories.
I would disagree.
I think CNET just got in some trouble there. What was that, Tom?
I said I would disagree. Yeah. Absolutely. I had a conversation with a teacher, a university professor just yesterday, and she brought up that very point. She was saying that her school is going to have to figure out how to make sure their students are not using ChatGPT. And I said, no, I said the opposite. I said, tell them to use ChatGPT, because have it be like an open book exam. Have them all use ChatGPT, and then you grade them on how well they use it, because they're going to use it anyway at some point. In the real world, when they leave your classroom, when they go out and get that job, they'll use tools like ChatGPT. So it's better they learn how to use them well rather than telling them they can't use it.
That's a really good point. That's Tom Raftery, our analyst friend, dialing all the way in from Spain. So thank you for that. It's 9 o'clock over there. So this man is dedicated to the cause. And that's a really good point. I mean, I would agree with you that there is a lot of good logic into suggesting that students use these technologies because they're going to use them later on in life. And what you'll learn pretty quickly, I think, is that ChatGPT at this point in time is fairly rudimentary. In other words, if you ask it to write a short story, it's going to have a very similar cadence and a similar style, but that's going to change over time. That's going to change as it gets smarter, as it gets more information. And it's going to change in lots of different ways. Of course, Microsoft, I think, has already invested $1 billion and is talking about investing another $10 billion. And OpenAI, the company that put this out, also has DALL-E, DALL-E, for creating images. I was playing around with that today too. So these are seriously game-changing technologies, and really it's rubber meets road, I would say, in the AI world. So with that, let's also bring in our other guest. We have Susan Hu out there from Graphen, and then we'll hear from Spiros Xanthos from Splunk as well. Susan, tell us a bit about yourself real quick and what Graphen is doing and what you think about all this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Susan, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications here at Graphen. We are an AI company based in New York City. We've been around for about 5 years, but really the founding team has been leading global AI projects for the last 15, 20 years. Our founder and CEO, Dr. Chen Yonglin, he used to be the IBM chief scientist leading a lot of really advanced AI projects. And we have been really spending the last few years building this AI foundation, which we call RD. Because if you think about AI, what is AI? It's artificial intelligence. We really want to mimic, but kind of go beyond how the human brain, human intelligence works. So we really spend the time to build this machine. It mimics how the human brain, the different parts of the brain works, not just memory, not just automation, not just simple machine learning, but rather looking at information in a way that human intelligence would. And we have been doing a lot of exciting things when it comes to using AI to solve real life problems, complex business and in real life, your day-to-day life problems. And I can't wait to share a little bit about that with you guys today. Thank you again for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's get an opening statement from our third guest as well. Spiros Xanthos is out there with a great t-shirt, Observe Ability, because we talk about observability in the data world. And that specifically refers to what you might think of being able to observe what's happening. So a lot of observability solutions are monitoring particular feeds of information, either data from a system or data from some person theoretically. Usually it's systems, IT systems, and their log files and what they're kind of saying to each other. You want to be able to see that, to read it, and to understand what it means. And a company that's done a lot of work in that space is Splunk. So Spiros, tell us a bit about yourself and what you folks are doing in the AI space.
Yes, thanks, Eric. My name is Spiros Xanthos. I work for Splunk, which is a data company. We are the leader in terms of market share in a few markets in cybersecurity and in IT ops and AI ops, which may be the most relevant to our discussion today. I'm an entrepreneur. I started 3 companies in the past. The last company I started was an observability company that Splunk acquired about 3.5 years ago. And now here at Splunk, I'm an SVP, and I'm the general manager for our observability business. So Splunk feels that a lot of IT and security problems are data problems. And we actually essentially combine data with a lot of intelligence to produce better outcomes for our users. In particular, I think AI ops is, let's say, an area in a term that has been gaining a lot of traction lately. And it's the idea of how do we combine, let's say, machine learning with big data to automate IT processes, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I think we're at an inflection point, like you mentioned, both because the data volume increases exponentially, and having more data, essentially, we can be more effective. The quality of data also increases. But I would say the underlying AI and ML, tools we have now available allow us to build a way more effective tools in helping, let's say, automate IT processes. Furthermore, I would say like generative AI, since we talked about ChatGPT, I think is going to be game-changing in the world of development as well. For things that have happened already, essentially machines are at the point where they can produce probably better and faster outcomes than individuals. And I'm not saying that we will be replacing developers, because it's a very advanced task that requires a lot of skill and experience. But I think we can make developers a lot faster and better, and IT professionals more generally, with tools that can assist them in their jobs.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, I'll bring Tom Raftery back in to comment on that. And I'll just say, earlier this week on our other show, Inside Analysis, we had a gentleman who talked about using ChatGPT to optimize their HTML codes to improve conversion rates on their website. I was like, really? He said, yeah, it worked, and it improved their conversion rates by like 30%. I can tell you 30% lift is not insignificant. I mean, a lot of times you're looking for 10% lift, 15%, something like that. But Tom, I mean, if you can apply this sort of generative AI technology, not just to text and images, but to code, that strikes me as a very significant inflection point, and one that's going to have pretty dramatic impact on the business. What do you think, Tom?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you referenced it earlier already, Eric. We're at very early stages of this, and we're already seeing some really impressive outcomes. To your point, that 30% increase is incredible. I remember when ChatGPT, shortly after it was launched, I came across an article, fascinating article, about a guy who opened up ChatGPT and told ChatGPT to create a terminal, a computer terminal within ChatGPT. And then he told it to open up a bash session, and then he told it to upgrade to the latest versions of whatever the programs were. And then he told it to launch a browser within the terminal. And then he told it to browse to ChatGPT. And then he started interrogating ChatGPT through a browser in a terminal in a virtual computer within ChatGPT. It became so meta, it was really bizarre. And, I mean, the things you can do with it are just incredible. It's phenomenal. I had fun playing around with it. one of the very first things I did was that I was explaining it to one of my kids who's 16, and he was looking at me, not quite getting what I was talking about. So I said, okay, what are you studying in maths at the moment? And he told me, I forget what it was, polynomial functions or something like that. So I said, okay. And I got up ChatGPT and I typed into it, explain polynomial functions in the voice of Hagrid to Harry Potter. And boom, up came this really good explanation in a really authentic Hagrid sounding voice. Well, not voice, obviously it wasn't audio, but it read just like Hagrid explaining it to Harry Potter, and my kid's head just exploded.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. And more seriously than that, I mean, I run a number of podcasts. I run 2 podcasts, and I publish 3 episodes across the 2 podcasts every week, and it's a lot of work. And I've started playing with ChatGPT for helping in production of the podcasts. So what I do with every podcast I do a full transcription, just because it aids in accessibility and it aids in search engine optimization. So what I've started to do is run the transcriptions through ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT, the podcasts are typically 30 minutes or longer. So you can't put the full transcription in one go. So what do? You break them into 3 or 4 parts, depending on the length. You give 10-minute segments to ChatGPT and you say, I'm giving you a transcription of a podcast. I'm breaking it into 3 parts. Here's part 1. Remember it as part 1. Tell me when you've parsed it. Boom. It says, okay. Wow. You give it part 2. You give it part 3, same kind of thing. And then it has the whole thing in memory in the session. And then you say, okay, write me a podcast description or show notes for this episode. Bang, up come the show notes. Write me a blog post outlining this to help promote the session. Boom, up comes a blog post. Write me 7 engaging tweets in the first person to help promote this podcast. Out come the tweets. Write me a LinkedIn post to help with this. Pull out 3 less than 30-second pieces of audio from this, which can be used in audiograms. Boom, 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 up come 3 or 5 or however many you choose. And then you could, this is stuff I was doing anyway for each podcast, but suddenly it's gone from hours to minutes to get the same kind of output. It's really, really, really helped my workflow.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And you know what? My first question about this, and I'll throw this over to Susan to comment on after, but my first question was, okay, what about copyright law? In other words, do you own the copyright then when you tell ChatGPT what to do? And actually, there's an article about this where they asked ChatGPT, what is the copyright on content coming from ChatGPT? And it gave a very refined and thoughtful answer, which was, well, we really don't know. We should leave it to the legal experts. And, there's something to be said for, yes, maybe if you really added to the creative spirit of making this content, and yes, it is ready for copyright, et cetera. I was like, that is very interesting. And, I think, not to get too far off track here, but we've been doing a show a long time. Like I said, we've had a lot of great guests over the years. And we've had guests come on and talk about how AI can be used to understand contracts, like contracts that you sign with businesses, and help you identify where there's risk in the contract, help you identify, maybe good clauses or bad clauses. And that's really getting somewhere, because now, as with ChatGPT, it understands words, it understands syntax, it understands context, it understands rules within context and syntax. It's like, all right, that's getting pretty cool. And back to what you started off with, Susan, and what you're doing at Graphen, the fact that you built an engine that was designed to mimic how a human brain works, well, that's what neural nets are supposed to do, at least theoretically. They may not do that in every way possible, of course, but tell us a bit more about that and why that matters, because knowing how to apply intelligence or data to a problem is a pretty deep thing, and it's something that humans can do, and eventually computers are going to be able to do it as well. But what do you think, Susan?
Yeah, amazing. That's exactly what I was thinking. First, I just want to come back to the point Tom was making earlier about students these days using AI to help them write their essays. It's not about don't use them, but rather how can we use the technology to facilitate what we do so that when we are actually in the real world for students, they can actually benefit from those technology, because that's essentially what AI is supposed to be doing, is to make our lives easier, not necessarily taking away our jobs, but rather making our lives earlier so we can get into the more creative side of that. And and I love, Eric, what you're talking about, that within putting everything within the context, because the reason why Graphen started building this full brain functionality of an AI is because when we look at AI these days, a lot of the so-called AI solutions, they are really only focusing on one part of the human brain. Most of them, they are either focusing on processing, automation, classification, or if it's built on open source, it's quite limited to the concept, sort of like the conceptual feature and sensor layer of the human intelligence. Mm-hmm. But Graphen, when we look at the future of AI, we believe to be able to truly solve problems, the complex real life problems in a human-like way, we have to reach the more semantic and the context layer, meaning you have to look at the pieces of information that coming into wherever you are, rather than looking at them as a two-dimensional spreadsheet. We need to look at the relationship between the information.
Yeah,
because if you think of,
that's where the graph comes in, right? So to explain to our audience, a graph technology is very compelling, because it's not just two-dimensional, like a relational database is three-dimensional, really. If it's a relational database, a spreadsheet is two-dimensional typically, but you can have nested structures and all kind of stuff. But a graph is much more multi-dimensional, and of course it has nodes and edges, and a node is like a person, an edge is a characteristic, and so graphs are very powerful for identifying relationships between things, and thus being able to string together context and meaning. Real quick, right, Susan?
Yes, absolutely. Because if you think about it, a human brain, if we put it into a graph, it's basically a huge graph of about 100 billion nodes and 7 trillion edges. What does that mean? That means the human brain is basically all those pieces of information that we have stored in us, and we make those connections. When we are solving problems, when we're innovating, essentially is we're trying to very quickly make a connection between the different pieces of information. And graph compute, that's why graph is such a big part of our AI RD platform. Within that graph, we're able to look at the different relationships. For human brain, we can probably think about a relationship of 2-3 layers, then we're kind of stuck. But with graph, because we're able to really from the very beginning of taking in the information, we already take into consideration the relationship between everything. That's why it's so much easier when we are really looking at the problems we want to try to solve. When we're trying to make predictions, it's so much higher. And these are all based on the real life project that our teams have been working on. Really based on the foundation of graph, we are able to kind of looking at the problems in a way human brain works,
we'll be right back.
much faster.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, we're talking all things artificial intelligence, narrow or deep, right? Narrow or broad. And I'll explain quickly what that means. Narrow AI, I love this concept, means it's very focused on a particular thing. So if it's broad, that's like deep learning, which is another whole set of AI disciplines that you can engage in. And deep learning is good for life sciences. It's good for kind of understanding root cause of things. Narrow AI is much more focused, like decisioning on a price point, for example. So optimizing a price or classifying something. That's what machine learning is good at. And just crawling through mountains of data to find little patterns and things like that. Machine learning, narrow AI are good for that. Deep learning is good, I guess, for the deeper things is a way to put it. But that's what I meant when I said narrow or deep about these different technologies. But Spiros Xanthos is in the house today from Splunk. He runs half of that product, from what I understand. And tell us a bit about how you see your clients, big enterprises, being able to use artificial intelligence to some positive effect.
Yeah, so Splunk, our customer base consists largely from large enterprises. More than 90% of the Fortune 100 companies are our customers. So a lot of my interactions are with, let's say, as I said, large enterprises. And what I see, maybe as a common pattern in general, is that obviously the technology in these companies aims to serve the business, right? And every business wants to increase its velocity, right, and execute faster and better, so it improves. And I think that so far, complexity and, let's say, shortage of talent have been, two of the biggest, let's say, friction points for large enterprises, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually run annually what we call a state of observability report, where we ask a lot of these types of users, let's say, about the perspectives. And we showed that AI ops as a concept, which is essentially the application of AI to operations, is gaining significant mindshare. And more than 71% of the respondents actually are interested or start using AI ops technologies. So anyway, the common pattern I see is that everyone says that the complexity is so big that I need much better tooling to deal with it, right? I cannot throw more people to the problem because I cannot even find the people to hire, let's say, in cybersecurity, IT operations, or developers to deal with the complexity. So I think it's actually a necessity at this point, in my opinion, that tooling becomes more intelligent, more effective. And I think now the inflection point we see with AI ops and generative AI actually comes at the right point to help us actually keep up with this complexity and to help us, meet the shortage of talent that we have by making all the professionals that exist in the space more effective, let's say.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And let me throw this question over to you. One of the first things that I noticed about ChatGPT versus Google, and I have heard on several good sources that Google is very concerned about the popularity of ChatGPT, especially now that Microsoft has stepped up and said, yeah, we're going to give them a whole bunch of money. So what do you think about that, Google? But what I like about ChatGPT is just the UI, because it's not just a command prompt link, which is basically what Google is. You just type in some text. And of course, Google did various cool things along the way, like is it Operation Hummingbird, I think, where they started giving you suggestions about what you may be typing for, which is very interesting. And again, kind of shepherds the search process. But still, the UI is the same as it's always been. It's just one little screen, one little field that you type into and hit enter. And with ChatGPT, you have much more of a console sort of environment, and it's designed to be explanatory. And of course, it does things for you. Like when you tell it to write a story, it'll write a story. That's a lot different than just giving you search results. But do you think we're going to see Google actually change its UI around this because of how disruptive ChatGPT is?
So I actually think that, first of all, what's so impressive maybe about ChatGPT is both its ability to understand prompts. It's extremely impressive, right? We've never seen anything like this before, let's say, at least in consumer use. And also, obviously, its ability to process and synthesize data that maybe did not exist before, right? Mm-hmm. So I do think that for a lot of types of questions where you need actually more of an explanation or maybe a summary of something, I think it's a better interface than the Google prompt, which is very fast, but typically just turns results that you have to crawl through yourself to understand. But I will also add the following, like, in my opinion, we're just at the beginning of this, right? Like, it's not different than, let's say, when maybe Apple released the iPhone, and we didn't even imagine all the uses we would have when we had like a device like this in our hands after many years, right? I do expect that the technology is going to actually be added, implemented, integrated into a lot of tools that we use today, like, say, in my area, in the enterprise world, where the interface is maybe going to be very different, or maybe not even an interface like a chat interface where we ask questions. It's just that the technology itself is going to enhance a lot of the things we do, and it's going to make us a lot more effective in how we use everyday tools, right? From how we compose emails, how we write code, or how we troubleshoot or debug systems, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I'll throw it over to Tom Raftery to comment on. Yeah, it's a much more robust environment, I suppose. It's just a different, and this is getting kind of deep, I suppose, but UI is really, really, really important, right? And we've kind of gone from the mainframe days into the client server days, then the early days of cloud, and now we're really in cloud. I don't know what it would be. Is it 3.0, Web 2.0, Web 3.0, or somewhere in between? But nonetheless, user interface is so important for productivity, for getting things done, right? And then the mobile world, I think, really revolutionized UI design because you had such a small little interface to deal with. So you had to rethink things, and the whole file, edit, view kind of thing that we've all gotten used to, that kind of went out the window. And with some of these apps, they're just all over the map as to how you actually interact with this thing. And then they change things. I actually know someone who apparently was part of the calculus in changing Google Maps, how it'll switch to a different view, at least on a Samsung. Like if you're driving, you got Google Maps open, all of a sudden they switch to this other view that tries to mimic your desktop on your phone. And I'm looking at it, go, what the heck is that? I'm driving, like trying to like keep the directions. Like, what are you doing to me? Don't do that to maps while I'm driving, man. I'm trying to use this thing to get around. But point being, the UI really matters. UI is a big deal in terms of productivity. So how do you see ChatGPT sort of energizing that whole conversation, Tom?
No idea. The short answer.
Good answer. Good answer.
I think Google did an amazing job when they started off, and they've kept it very simple always. There was just the search box, as you said, and in small text down near the bottom, if you look carefully, there was an advanced options you could click on and put in more search operators and things like that. But it's what made, and it was so different to all the other search engines at the time. And ChatGPT has a similar interface. It's just a single field like that. You can put in whatever you want, but the output is radically different. And I think right there, when you do a search in Google and you get your search results out, you get a bunch of ads and you get video links and podcast links and text links, and they're ranked in different orders and so on and so on. You do a search in ChatGPT and you just get your answer, and it's usually a pretty good one. And that's where I think Google are in trouble. Now, there's no ads because ChatGPT are at the kind of 98 stage that Google was at, where they hadn't come up with their business model yet.
Right.
And there were no ads in Google results at that time either. So who knows which way ChatGPT will go in terms of revenue.
Right.
I suspect, I don't know, but my guess would be they'll go the freemium model rather than the ad-supported model. Or maybe it'll be a mix. Maybe it'll be, if you're on the free tier, you get ads. If you're on the pro tier, you don't. I don't know. But that will change. When that starts to kick in, that'll change the UI significantly.
Yeah, that's also an excellent point, right? Where do the ads come? How transparent will we be about the ads? I mean, there's advertising everywhere. You watch movies, there are ad placements, product placements. There's nothing new about that. And you're right. You get the freemium model, and then someone pulls the string and everything changes. But what's interesting is just how different this technology really is compared to what we've seen before. And I'll throw it over to Susan to kind of comment on that. But yeah, again, on that show on Monday on Inside Analysis, one of the guests just nailed it. He goes, yeah, well, instead of Googling it, I just go to ChatGPT. I'm like, oh, that is the statement right there. Instead of Googling it, I mean, well, like, how are we going to get over this? We've been Googling stuff for 20 years now, right? And they're still, you look at the numbers, Google is just crushing Bing, and Yahoo, I guess, is still out there, but give me a break. It's almost all Google. It's like 85% or something like that. But this interface does change things, and it is, I think it's more amenable for getting things done. Susan, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point by comparing Google even with Yahoo, because back then when I think Yahoo was even earlier as a search engine when they were first around, but because of the way Google worked, it was so much better. It was so much more user friendly, and the database that they had was so much bigger. So when you go to Google, it was a lot more effective when you're looking for the answers. And that's what's essentially what we're seeing, what ChatGPT is doing right now in a way that's even more innovative. So I feel like the next step would probably become more and more human-like, because when we are using those technologies, essentially we're trying to get help. I'm looking for answers. I'm hoping someone to help me to write a copy. I'm hoping to get some sort of creative things going by inputting whatever questions I have. And the way that human interacts, we interact through not just typing. We also interact through conversations, through body language. And I do feel like that's why it's so exciting as we start to develop those AI technology that's more human-like, so that when for example, today, literally, Graphen, we are filing this pattern for this conversational AI that's going to be deployed at a tea shop, where you can literally ordering your drinks from an AI that looks like a human, that make eye contact with you, that when you go into the store, she will go closer to you on the screen like a normal human interaction would be. And it does feel like business has been ever evolving as the technology is kind of being innovating. So really excited to see how this kind of technology can really serve us for business to become more efficient, more effective, but also from the consumer side, how can we feel more comfortable using those technology, feeling like it's almost like I'm just communicating with a human, getting the same amount of support, if not more.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I'll bring Spiros back in too, because there's this huge territory of consumerization, in other words, the sort of human to ChatGPT environment, but then there's the whole machine to machine world and having some sort of AI monitoring and just kind of looking for things. And I'll throw just one theory out at you, Spiros, and see what you think about it. But I remember being asked to do a speech on AI versus data warehousing, and will one beat the other? And what I said is, no, you want both. You want that deterministic view of the world through your data warehouse, but you also want AI to kind of surface things that you didn't think about. And in one respect, it kind of gives you depth perception, because with one eye, you don't have depth perception. You have depth perception with two eyes because you can triangulate onto the object, and that's how you understand space. And it's really kind of important to have that other eye. And that's where I see this stuff coming around. But what do you think, Spiros?
First, like my perspective, by the way, as a user of the interface, is that generally so far we try to have machines be the interface for users. Think about when you're calling, let's say, a support center for your airline or something, right? And generally it has been annoying, right? Even chatbots, very limited. I think the way now, let's say, modern AI technology, generative AI, the example of ChatGPT works, I think it's going to change our perspective, and we might be in a situation where we prefer to interact with machines instead of humans. Actually, it might be a lot more efficient. So I expect a lot of innovation actually in this space, in all these areas where we interact with machines. Now, to your point about data and AI, actually my philosophy on this is that, first of all, in general, let's say AI technology is more effective when there is more data to train it on, right? And we have had an explosion of data, especially machine data, that is being generated by all the systems we use. And my view is that ideally what you want is you want to have a system that, let's say, as a human, I can deterministically get to an answer. Like if I know all the steps I need to follow, or if I somehow find the steps that I need to follow, I can get to an answer. Let's say I'm dealing, for example, with some sort of an error or a downtime. I should be able to essentially follow data to get me to an answer, even if that takes a long time, right?
Right.
Now,
right.
where AI comes in, I think it should allow us to short circuit this investigation, right? And should explore all the possibilities, which might be countless in some sense, in a much faster fashion than, let's say, a human can do, and essentially assist us in getting to an answer a lot faster than we would otherwise be able to. But generally speaking, having a deterministic way of getting to an answer is probably important as well, even for reasoning purposes, right? So I do see, although the applications of this kind of technology are going to look very different from what we see with ChatGPT, since this is the topic, I do think they're going to create a revolution, let's say, in the way we actually interact with machines and help troubleshoot and monitor and operate software systems.
That's a really, really, really good point. And to be blunt, you get right down to brass tacks. Any given language like English or German or Russian is a heck of a lot more complex than most of the programming languages we have out there. And so if you get down to machine data, it's yes, it's ones and zeros at a binary level, but also it's code, it's log files and things of that nature, which a computer like this in a fairly short period of time would be able to understand and pretty quickly master. And so I think the real innovation is going to be infusing this sort of AI technology like ChatGPT in and amongst all your enterprise systems to find things for you. But folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You are listening to DM Radio.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanagh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, back here on DM Radio. What a fun show. We're talking to Tom Raftery, industry analyst, also Susan Hu from Graphen, and we have Spiros Xanthos from Splunk, pretty big observability vendor, really like the original observability vendor as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Splunk came along, just for some context, folks, and absolutely revolutionized IT operations. And one of the funny comments I heard from one of the smartest people I know, he said, who would have thought that IT ops would get such an innovative technology? Because no one back then ever wanted to spend a dime on IT ops. It was like, you guys just make that stuff work. We're going to do the important things. And then Splunk comes along and gives all of this tremendous visibility into systems at scale. But in the break there, we were kind of talking, Spiros, Google will probably have some response to this. I mean, they've got a bunch of other stuff going on. Google has launched a lot of cool technologies that then kind of go away and they get lost in the shuffle. I mean, I remember probably almost 2 years ago that automatically in Gmail, it started surfacing what it thought were important emails for me to look at. And they were pretty good at that. I was like, wow. And then that went away. So I don't know if I just checked a box somewhere.
Well, actually, in Gmail today, oftentimes you get very good suggestions for to complete what you're typing, right? So
yeah.
I do expect to see a lot more like these kind of more subtle uses of AI that are going to start surfacing in things we use every day. And actually, my perspective on obviously what OpenAI did with ChatGPT is extremely impressive, and I'm sure they're gonna be very successful. But I do think that actually the wave we're seeing with AI is going to be a lot more broad, and I don't think that like companies like Google has like similar technology probably that they're going to reveal. And I think there are going to be a lot more players and a lot more applications of this technology beyond what we see today. In as I said, with very different interfaces and very different kind of uses. So unlike, let's say, maybe the mobile wave, where Apple essentially the iPhone was the main, let's say, interface. Right. I think in this case, I don't think it's going to be just OpenAI. I think it's a much more broader industry-wide event that we'll see many other players, and we're going to see a lot of disruption. I think a lot of industries are going to be disrupted. A lot of existing, let's say, big companies are going to be disrupted by newer approaches to solving problems with AI.
Yeah, and just to remember, I'll throw it over to Tom here. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mentioned I run a couple of podcasts, and one of the podcasts I run is called the Digital Supply Chain Podcast, and it's one where I publish 2 episodes a week, Monday and Friday. And I have, because I run so many episodes, 2 a week, I've hundreds of episodes in the back catalog, and I'm talking to companies about best practices and trends in the digitalization of supply chain. And the amount of stories I hear about the use of AI in supply chain is amazing, and the different kind of use cases for it. I'll just give you a couple of examples. There's one company, for example, who are using AI for visual inspections, and they do it at an incredible scale and incredible speed. So they can take, these big automotive plants where they're doing die casts with these big die cast machines, and they just stamp these big steel plates into shapes for cars. Well, the AI can scan these in seconds and find any flaws where it would take human workers, minutes to do the same kind of scan. They also have ones they can deploy on railway tracks, and they can scan the wheels of trains that are going by, identify the trains, identify the wheels, and look for wear on the wheels and alert the operators that this particular wheel on this particular train. And these are trains traveling at speed. That's right. So that's just one example. Another is companies working for customs brokers. And what they do is, for customs brokers have to fill out all these forms for different packages that are entering or leaving a country. And these forms are, oftentimes they're transcribing information from one box to another. And that's okay if it's one box. It'll take, 15 minutes to fill out the form for that one parcel. But if it's a pallet with 7,000 parcels within it, that takes a team of people several days to do the same job. Now they have an AI that can do that kind of thing in minutes. Wow. So, these kind of things, the efficiencies that are being brought into all these kind of different use cases and all these different industries from the deployment of different AIs is just off the scale. It's changing completely, and it's getting better year on year on year on year on year as more and more use cases are identified and more companies are coming up and filling those gaps.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And, you get back to machines versus humans. And I always try to steer people away from the thinking that the machine is going to replace the human. I mean, that is the case. You do hear it. They even talk in corporate world about headcount and using AI to lower headcount and so forth. So that is true. But what I point out to people is that it's not so much that the machines are taking your jobs. It is the case rather that the machines are helping you do your job more effectively and saving you time and effort and all this stuff, so you can focus on the higher value process. That's what it really boils down to. And the better we get at leveraging these kinds of technologies, we're going to get much better at solving world problems. I'll throw it over to Susan Hu from Graphen to comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like machines or AI, those technologies that we're using, they're really helping us to improve that efficiency. Like the examples Tom was giving, it's perfect. It's like it takes humans days, maybe even weeks to do. Machines can do it so much faster, but also a lot more accurately. Then it really frees humans from those labors that might be dangerous for us, might not be necessarily something that's fulfilling for us, so that we can be free to do something that's a little bit more innovative. And another thing is here, at least here in the US, since the pandemic, we lost a lot of the manual labors, a lot of the things that humans used to do. We cannot even hire enough people to fill those positions. And not to say all the trainings, all the fast turnaround time, if we're able to create some sort of solutions using the AI technology to solve those problems, to fill those gaps, then in a way, we are really a lot of technology to make our life so much better, to make it more efficient, again, more accurate. And machines are able to also help us to make predictions in a way that human mind might not be able to come to. And that's really the exciting part of really how AI has been changing the entire business, the landscape we're seeing these days.
I think
Go ahead.
I think a good analogy, Eric, is the construction industry, because if you think back to the early 1900s, how many people would it take to build a building like the Empire State Building? Where you didn't have the likes of the heavy machinery that we have today. Whereas today, the same amount of people could build a building that size in a tenth of the time, or with a tenth of the number of people, So it's not that we have less people in construction. Possibly we have, possibly we haven't. I don't know what the numbers are like. But their productivity, the number of buildings that they can output now versus they could 100, 120 years ago, because of the introduction of, big tools like diggers, like, I don't know what tools they use in the construction industry. It's been a long time since I worked there, but you know what I mean? They all that big heavy machinery just helps them be a lot more efficient. It's the same thing in technology with AI. It's just more tools to help people do more work more efficiently.
Totally. And as a real life example here at Graphen, we worked with the largest aftermarket leader here in the automotive space. So during the pandemic, they lost a lot of mechanics that's to fix cars. These are very specific jobs. You have to be trained for a long time to be able to do that. And because of that loss of the manual labor, they come to us. They were like, are you able to help us develop some sort of a car doctor? And we did. And with the machine, not only we're able to solve those problems, we're also able to reach 98% of accuracy, which previously takes years of experience for someone to get to that level. So that's really, machines are doing our jobs better than us, but also freeing us from those things that we used to have to spend so much time learning and practicing.
That's a really good point. And Spiros, I'll throw it over to you to comment. Got about a minute and a half left. The complexity of enterprise systems is a lot like the complexity of a modern Ferrari versus a 1974 Dodge, for example. Many new parts, a lot more data that we're gathering. So it's a very powerful analogy. What do you think?
Exactly. So I think, as you mentioned, that Splunk is the original observability company. Observability as a modern concept emerged exactly because the complexity that we have to deal with in these kinds of enterprise systems is so high that we cannot keep up with it without better tooling, right? So I think more data and more effective AI is going to allow us to keep up with this complexity, and it's going to make us more effective. Now, that said, I truly think there is going to be an impact on certain jobs and roles, and I think we as a society have to be thoughtful about the use of AI and its evolution. But I'm an optimist also, right? I believe in technology, and I believe in humans. And I think in the long run, this is going to be, all this evolution in technology is going to be beneficial to us. It's going to make us more effective, more productive, and hopefully it's going to improve overall, let's say, the economic conditions for most people anyway.
Yeah, rising tide lifts all boats, as they say. I think the rising AI tide is going to improve all business processes. You're going to see it everywhere. It's going to get baked into things. I mean, that's the nice thing about this, is that you don't necessarily have to go out and get ChatGPT yourself to benefit from it, because it's going to get baked into things, especially in the Microsoft world. I mean, I already see this happening. I guarantee they're very cleverly thinking through how they're going to take advantage of all this and make sure it benefits Microsoft, because you want it baked in everywhere. Well, podcast bonus segment is up next, folks. You are listening to DM Radio.